Hello, everyone, and welcome to Robert Half Real Talk Tech Debt, Transformation, and Talent. I am Lorraine Cayley, your moderator for today's session, and I am joining you from San Francisco. I would love to hear from all of you in the chat. Where are you calling in from, and what are you hoping to learn about today? I know I'm personally really excited for all the T's we're going to cover, but I am especially excited to hear what our panelists have to say about talent. We have an incredible panel lined up for you, featuring experts who will share their insights on how to navigate the challenges and seize the opportunities ahead in tech. Robert Half also recently released its Building Future Forward Tech Teams report, comprised of Robert Half's own research on tech hiring challenges and critical skills gaps. So we will get to hear more about what they found and how it can help tech leaders prepare for the future. A quick bit of housekeeping for you all. This session today will be about 45 minutes and it is recorded so you can watch it back whenever you want. And at any time throughout this session, I encourage you all to please drop questions for the panelists in the comments. We will do our best to answer all of them. And of course, please share your own experiences about what you're seeing in your organizations so we can all continue learning from each other. So I'm going to go to the chat here to see where people are from. We're getting a lot of hellos. Maynard is here looking to gain some valuable insights. Amazing. Well, without further ado, let's meet our panelists. So first, we have George Denlinger, President of Technology Talent Solutions at Robert Half. George is an expert on hiring and talent strategies for the technology and marketing practice groups, and he'll be sharing many of those strategies with us today. We also have Sadie St. Lawrence, founder and CEO of Human Machine Collaboration Institute, which pioneers research and education to optimize human and machine interaction in this new era of knowledge work with AI. And finally, I'd like to introduce Seth Robinson, VP of Industry Research at CompTIA. CompTIA is a leading association of the IT industry and workforce dedicated to advancing the global tech industry through education, certification, advocacy, and research. And Seth is going to be sharing his knowledge on the latest technology industry trends today. So hello to all our panelists, welcome. And before we dive into the topic of our conversation today, I wanted to start with a fun question to get to know them a little bit better. And for those of you in the audience, feel free to participate and share your answers as well. So my question for today is, if you could have any superpower to help you tackle tech challenges, what would it be and why? And so, George, I'll kick it over to you to start.
Well, thank you, and great to be here with everyone. It's a tough one. A lot of things you'd like to be. I'd probably go with the Flash, the really speedy guy, and just try to keep just in the way the speed of change is happening. New jobs are coming out, new skills are required. You kind of feel like you need to be the Flash today to keep up. So that would be my go-to for superpower.
Nice. Great movie, too. Sadie, what about you?
Yeah, we definitely need superpowers for technical transformation. So I would love to have mind reading abilities because I always find one of the hardest things is the translation between technical teams and business teams. And if I could read what the business was thinking, I could be a better translator. So I would love to read people's minds, but also shut it off now and again, too.
Yeah, such a game changer. And Seth, what about you?
Well, doing a live stream here, I think we're all contractually obligated to mention AI within the first 5 minutes. And so I think mine would be X-ray vision to look inside a lot of AI tools, because so many of them that are going to be coming to businesses are going to be black boxes of a sort. And people are going to be using that output, but they don't always know how that output is getting generated. And so I think that more and more, they're going to want to know that. And so I think that it'd be really helpful to see.
Yeah, that's a great one. I imagine a lot of people want that superpower. For me, I think, I would want to be some sort of shapeshifter. That we're going to see a lot of this throughout, but, adaptability, a lot of things are changing really quickly. So to be able to put myself into new settings, new teams as quickly as possible and sort of adapt, I think would be a very powerful superpower in the workplace. So thank you all for that. Excellent superpowers. And now I want to kick things off with a discussion on the biggest challenges and opportunities shaping tech teams today. As I'm sure you all in the audience have seen, there are so many headlines every day about all of these changes happening around us at work. So, George, I mentioned earlier there is some really interesting research that Robert Half recently published. So, can you tell us more about it? Can you share some of the more critical takeaways, both in terms of priorities and challenges that tech leaders are facing?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lorraine. So yes, recently published Building Future Forward Tech Teams, tons of content in there about where talent is headed, where skills are headed. Um, as it relates to your question, priorities, I'll kind of split it down the middle. For companies that we work with, companies are very focused on hiring in, it's no surprise, cybersecurity, very hot right now, AI machine learning, data analytics. You got to have good data in order to implement AI. And then, it's a little bit of an aside, but we see a lot of priorities around ERP systems, and I think you've got a question about that later. As it relates to challenges for our clients that we talk to, again, no surprise, budget cost constraints. Number
Yeah.
one, 51% of the survey results came back that based on cost constraints, shortage of staff, but the staff with the necessary skills. May have the team, they may not have the team with the skills. So that was 48% of our survey responded there.
Wow.
And then implementation complexity. And, it's a lot of this stuff is new. There's new tools, new technology. So it's very complex. 39% of the leaders we surveyed indicated that was their third biggest challenge.
Some big
George, you had a
percentages.
lot of things there that I would love to unpack, but the one that jumps out the most is you mentioned these three things: AI, data, and cybersecurity. I think we're seeing the same thing in our research coming from hiring managers, HR professionals. I think those three are really rising to the top. And I would point out it's not just specialists in those areas. I think a lot of companies are feeling like they also need those skills as part of the digital fluency of the entire workforce. So all of those topics are really rising to the top now as focus areas and priorities for a lot of organizations.
Really great.
Yeah, and I'll add on to what Seth said because that additional skill of AI needed into the whole workforce oftentimes gets put on the tech leaders too. Because what we're seeing is other leaders in the organization are going to the tech teams and saying, okay, we want to train all of our business on AI. And so now the tech team also has an added burden of that. And so what I'm seeing is just the rate of change is so much for the organization. And where the rate of change is coming from is all in technology. And just as George mentioned, everything in regards to AI, data science, machine learning. But then when you implement that, you need the cybersecurity to go along with it, right? And then you need to scale it to the organization. So there's a lot of priorities on technical teams today. And it's really hard to know, how do I keep up? What do I focus on? And how do I put my own mask on first, but then also help others in the organization and bring them along? So a lot of competing priorities for technical teams today.
Yeah, you've all shared some really excellent data and then also helpful insights as well, because I know, for me personally, and I know I'm not alone in this, sometimes we see our leaders and our managers and we know they're busy doing a lot, but sometimes we don't realize just how much they're juggling to not only, make sure they're being a good manager, helping us grow in our careers, but also there's all this stuff happening on the back end with the team, with the organization to make sure it's successful. So there's a lot going on that we don't see. And so I'm curious, when we drill down a little bit further to a team level, what skills gaps are we seeing and how is this impacting business growth and transformation? And so Seth, I'll throw it to you first.
Sure. Yeah. We've talked about these three big ones of AI, data, cybersecurity, but we've got a lot of research, including some new research that I just did, that shows that areas like IT support and infrastructure and software development, those are kind of right up there in terms of skill gaps. They don't get as much focus area. And maybe because they're not such high focus areas, the organization hasn't given them as much attention as they might need to, and those areas are changing too in terms of the amount of infrastructure that you might need to support all of this data moving around, or the type of IT support that's getting provided as the workforce is becoming a little bit more savvy with their technology. So I think all of these things are changing, and there's big skill gaps and big opportunity for a lot of people to get into these areas as a starting point, and then grow into some of these more advanced specialists that we've been talking about a little bit.
Seth, and I love that. And, people think, you move automatically to AI, machine learning, all this stuff, but you got to have the infrastructure to run it. And that often comes down to, do you have the architecture, you have the infrastructure, and maybe those are some of the things they don't get talked about as often from a need. What we've seen, so certainly, right, the normal skills in AI, machine learning, there's two comments I would make. First is the demand for new skills is emerging so quickly. And you go back just a couple of weeks ago, Google had their I/O conference. They had to announce the top 100 new things they released. So they released more than 100. And it was, here's the top 100. I mean, that's how fast this stuff is coming. So there's new skills that you need that are just emerging literally in front of our eyes. The second thing that I would comment on is the human skills. And when you think about skills that are needed, we talk about, the need to be a constant learner, the need to be open to new ideas, the need to be creative. Okay, here's my job today. How can I do my job using AI? And there's not really a handbook to do that right now. So not just maybe this hard skills, and there's plenty of them that you need, but it's also what we refer to as human skills or soft skills. And without both of them, you're probably missing a pretty big opportunity.
I couldn't agree more with the human skills that you mentioned, George, because we talk about how fast tech is changing, but that's one thing to know, that the human skills you can invest in won't change as much and are always a good thing to invest in. Things like curiosity, things like working as a team member, those things I'm seeing where it's even needed more in the age of AI, where let AI do its thing. We need to be human. And so I'm seeing a big need in skills just in terms of like systems thinking. How do I think about a system as a whole, and where do the pieces fit together? The other area I'm seeing in the tech hiring side of things is really from domain expertise. So I've talked about the tech skills and the human skills, but if you have a particular domain expertise, say you've worked in healthcare or you've worked in finance, that is going to be key, particularly for organizations looking to do transformation. So if you have something between the technical skills and a domain expertise, you really have a superpower that you can lean into.
Those are great responses. And I see we have a question from the audience related to perhaps some of the skills that you're all talking about here. What are the best opportunities to pivot into tech from other industries? Does anyone want to chime in on that question from our audience?
I can start off with this one
Sure.
because I love career changers. I think career changers are superpowers because you're taking lessons you've learned from one industry, adding on new skills, as George mentioned, being a lifelong learner, and you have the opportunity to combine these together. So, what I always tell career changers is don't throw out everything from your past career. There's probably a lot that you can bring forward with you. And what I like to do is I like to write on a sheet of paper, transferable skills, right? What are the things that are going to be transferable to the new job? And then where am I missing skills? Maybe I'm missing some skills on the technical side. I switched from neuroscience into AI. I knew how to do analysis, I knew statistics, but I wasn't great at coding. And so I knew I needed to fix my coding skills. So take some time to write out what are the transferable skills, don't throw those out, and then find the gaps and focus your learning on that.
And you mentioned before, Sadie, the benefit that someone can bring if they're bringing in healthcare knowledge or banking knowledge or retail knowledge. As digital transformation is happening more and more, we're seeing that become so critical that you need to blend technical knowledge with industry knowledge to produce the best results. These things aren't just happening in silos anymore. And the other thing that I would add is, if you are trying to change careers and move into a technical field, Traditionally, historically, the typical thing to do has been to like get into IT support and then you can get into IT infrastructure. But I think things have spread out so much. And when we talk about our IT framework at CompTIA with support, infrastructure, software development, cybersecurity, and data, I think that there are early career or maybe kind of career changing positions in each of those. And that didn't used to be the case in something like cybersecurity, where you were typically taking a relatively advanced infrastructure professional. But I think now organizations are trying to create that early career or maybe career changing opportunity within cybersecurity that doesn't require deep cybersecurity knowledge or even deep networking knowledge, but you can come in with some basic knowledge. Maybe you would take some training or a certification to build up some of those skills that Sadie was talking about, get in at that starting point, and then be able to make progress in whichever discipline is the most interesting to you.
Yeah, I think fantastic. I think certainly there's certain backgrounds where you have maybe an aptitude towards this type of work that we're talking about, right? That certain career changes are going to have more alignment, maybe have more in the pluses column. Sadie, to your point. But I wouldn't discourage anybody. And when you think about it, we talked about all the new skills, all the new tools, all the new trainings. A lot of the trainings that are out there and certifications are either relatively inexpensive or free. You can get a lot of those right away for free. I love to tell. I have a neighbor 4 doors down. She was a history teacher 4 years ago. Today, she is a Scrum Master for Salesforce, working on Agentforce, which is one of their new agentic agent tools. Certainly, she had a lot of kind of aptitude to do that work in the past, but she didn't necessarily have the experience. And kind of through certifications and getting some informal mentorships, she was able to land a great career change. So I don't know it has to be one thing or another, but you definitely, there's a lot that you can do to get ramped up quickly.
Yeah, I love all those responses. When I was at LinkedIn, we talked a lot about it being a skills-based economy. And so hopefully for this person who asked this question, they're seeing anything's possible basically, right? You have all the resources online, you can reach out to people, ask them about their experiences, but it's about finding your story and the common thread perhaps that goes through all the different things that you're doing. And then you can certainly learn the skills that are needed for whatever position that you're interested in. So thank you all for those wonderful responses. And I want to get a little more technical for a moment. George, you mentioned earlier, there's an acronym I've heard a few of you use before, ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning. What in the world is ERP, and what are some of the difficult parts about implementing or upgrading an ERP system? And how can teams proactively address their ERP system? So George, since you mentioned it earlier, I'll throw it over to you first.
Well, yeah, because it's an interesting tangent, right? Because we're talking about AI, we're talking about all this futuristic stuff, and then you turn around and talk about kind of legacy ERP systems. So, think of, there's a ton of them, SAP, Oracle, right? That's what we're talking about. And really what we've heard from our, survey is, many leaders are stuck with what we call technical debt. And that essentially is, old legacy systems, software, et cetera, that companies are running that has all their data. I have an analogy for you because I just flew through there yesterday. Think about Newark Airport. Okay, Newark Airport. They've had all these air traffic control issues, right? What that's all about is they have old systems. They have old mainframes that they're running new technology through. So as good as the new technology is going through, it's this great giant pipe it goes through. It has to go all the way through an old DSL phone line in order to be useful. That's technical debt, right? You can't use the new technology with old technology. So what we found is, many of our clients are working on upgrading their old systems in order to implement AI, use big data, be able to capitalize on machine learnings, and all of the things that we've talked about. So that's a little bit on kind of why are we talking about ERP when the topic is kind of future forward tech and tech debt. So I'm sure my panelists will have some thoughts about that as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. You're talking about ERP, which has typically been the domain of really large enterprise, right? Hence the name, enterprise resource planning. And if you're an SMB, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers right now either work for a smaller company, they don't have ERP in their company. But with software as a service, with all of these different cloud applications that have risen up, a lot of SMBs are beginning to piece together their version of an ERP, and they're digitizing things that have never been digitized before. I think for them, it might not be technical debt in the way that you're describing, where you've got these old systems and you're trying to do migrations. It's almost more of like a process debt type of thing, where like you maybe should have digitized these things a little while ago, and now you're trying to do it all at once and integrate it all together. And there are a lot of the same challenges, right? When we talk about the data, it's like, which data are we using? Where does it go? Is everything connected to it? I think that question is the same for an ERP migration as it is for an SMB trying to put all of these things together one application at a time. So I think that these forms of debt are probably common across company size, and the need for skill is also common to solve the debt problems.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing George is talking about tech debt, legacy systems. Um, you said they're talking about like the structural challenges. I mean, ERP, I'm learning right now, is a huge undertaking. And so, you both touched on this, tackling such a big initiative, undertaking. Really, you need the right support and the right people in place in order to make it possible, right? And to make it happen. So I want to talk about the people part of it for a minute. So in such a competitive market, how do you actually find and keep top talent to help you achieve whatever goal it is that you're trying to do, whether it's, fixing up ERP or something else? So, Sadie, I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah, great question, because I think so often we think about the new people we want to bring on the team and forget sometimes to take care of the people that we have. And that really is where like the gold mine is of rich domain expertise and experience. And so keeping the right people on your team really comes down to understanding them as individuals, but also understanding their motivation. Each individual is motivated for different reasons. Some it may be monetary reasons, some may be title, some may be the meaning of the work. And so this isn't a one size fits all. You really have to take the time to understand the people on your team and what is their motivation. And then from there, just knowing that it doesn't have to be a linear path. So you may have someone in a data engineering role. It doesn't mean they stay senior engineer, principal engineer, go on to a VP of engineering. Maybe they zigzag a little bit. Maybe they go from an engineering role to a data science role. Or I love George's story where he shared of the individual who went from a teacher to working at Salesforce and doing Agentforce. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities. And so, really mapping out what are the skills your team has, understanding their motivations, and creating a path that's individualized and personalized and works for them is going to help keep people in the system.
Yeah, I love that. Careers are not a ladder, right? I thought
Yes.
that earlier on, and nope, lots of twists and turns. Seth, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Sadie is saying. And I think it ties back to something that got mentioned before, which is this skills-based approach that a lot of organizations are trying to move towards. And we see a lot of HR functions within those organizations trying to adopt skills-based hiring or skills-based career development. I think those things all tie together. And like Sadie said, there are a lot of challenges in building out that approach, not the least of which is deciding which skills are we even talking about, and are we all talking the same language, and how do we validate those skills, whether we're bringing people in from the outside or we're trying to take care of our own people and provide some upskilling and reskilling and career changing opportunities for them. I think a lot of it can be based on using a skills based framework, but you have to build out that framework, and you have to kind of build out a taxonomy of skills and then job roles, and which skills go with which job roles, and what do some pathways look like that don't have to be set in stone like we're saying, but they still give people, I think, some opportunity to do what Sadie mentioned before, of kind of look and say, okay, I'd like to get into this role. I have these skills, I need these other ones. Now I can go and invest in some training, and hopefully the company is providing some of those investment opportunities, and providing a lot of flexibility, whether that's internal training that they're building out or some kind of a reimbursement or stipend for external training that the individual could go pursue.
Yeah, I think the skills thing, I'm going to circle back on that. Sadie, I'd love your non-linear kind of explanation of careers. And I'm sure anybody we're talking to, right? I mean, there's very few people that have this perfectly linear ladder career, right? You kind of bounce around, move all over. Seth, on the skills thing, I'd argue there's a mandate for everyone who kind of works in any virtually any job to think about how you can incorporate AI into your daily job. There's the saying going around today. It's not mine, so I'm not going to take credit for it. But AI won't replace your job. Somebody who can use AI to do your job will replace your job. And and I think when you look at where you've got to be, whatever your role, wherever you're listening from, being able to use AI in your day-to-day life is, I'd argue, a mandate. How do you do that? I think, Seth, you hit some of this, seeking out some structured learning opportunities, looking for professional development, upskilling. I referenced coursework. Many of those are free out there, getting certifications. And certainly that's all on the job seeker side. On the employer side, for those managers out there, I would, my feedback is you try not to recruit to, I need these top 10 things, and I'm not going to look at somebody if they don't have all 10. You're recruiting for potential, not just experience today. Prioritize flexibility, look at, what do we need to offer to get the right types of individuals here, not just with the right hard skills, but the right soft skills. I was with a CIO of a very large company, and he indicated to me he thought somewhere between 25 and 30% of his staff doesn't have the right skill set, and he meant mostly soft skill set to be able to go to kind of work within his organization going forward as we embrace all these new tools and all these new technologies. And so that, there's going to be big opportunities for people with the right attitude and aptitude.
Yeah,
I
all
love
these different.
George that.
Oh,
Oh, I was just going to say, I love George that you talked about hiring for potential. I'm a beneficiary of hiring for potential. I used to build microprocessors at IBM, and then I decided I wanted to do something different. And I clearly didn't have all the skills to be a research analyst, but CompTIA, saw potential and brought me on. And I've been here for 14 years. It's worked out great for me. I've really enjoyed it. Hopefully, it's worked out great for CompTIA. But I think that we talk about this skills-based approach, and there's a tendency to want to turn that into a science, right? And okay, we'll just list out all the skills and we check them off. And if you're a job seeker, then you get them. But I think there's still an art to it as well, right? And being able to interview and recognize that, okay, this person doesn't have all the skills, but they've been building some of their skills and they'll probably continue doing that. And they seem to have some of the soft skills that we'd like to see them have, and they can really be a benefit to our organization. I still think there are a lot of managers out there and leaders that aren't quite doing that. And in order to break through this logjam of the gap between supply and demand, I think it still will take some of that type of thinking.
I 100% resonate with everything that you've all said. And so what I'm hearing, intentionality, openness with skill building is key from, whether it's the employer or the employee when it comes to upskilling. And we actually have a question, a related question from Ricardo in the audience. And Ricardo is someone who looks like he's very proactive about upskilling and also is growing his AI expertise. So for the employees who are really making a vested effort to learn and to grow, how might they position themselves to the leadership team in order to unlock new career opportunities or help them, reach that next level faster?
And maybe I'll jump real quick and then turn it
Please.
over. For your existing company, peer-to-peer mentorships. Everybody thinks, I've got to find somebody to above me to sponsor me, but even just some peer-to-peer mentorships. How can I work alongside of you? What can we do together? Finding ways to kind of help to network within your own organization. The other thing that I would say is, and obviously we're in the job placement business. A lot of jobs that are handed out, when people get those jobs, they know somebody. And really, I mean, maybe more than ever today, you've got to be working your network. You've got to be connecting with people, and that might be tangential of, here's somebody, I know this person, but they know somebody, and who do you know that works within here? And here's my background. Here's what I want to do. You've got to be very proactive today from a networking standpoint to be able to kind of, find those opportunities that you might be interested in.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of work is built on relationships, right? So find those right people and make your work known and make sure to advocate for yourself, right? And then word starts spreading and people will know to reach out to you, Ricardo, like, oh, Ricardo's learning this, like he would be a great person for this new project.
I'll just add on to what George said, which is peer-to-peer mentorship is fantastic. And if you want to position yourself for a leadership position, which it sounds like what Ricardo's doing with learning some of these new skills, you need to be leading people so that they see you as a leader. So take what you're learning in AI and start teaching others. Start showing the organization that you're bringing others along in this journey. So it's more than just learning the technical skills, but also really learning those leadership skills and practicing those leadership skills. Oftentimes, people get put in leadership positions after they've been doing the work, not before they've been doing the work. And so if you're looking to get into that position, teach others in your organization. It will be a great way to practice your leadership skills.
And the last thing that I would add is make sure that you can describe your skills in an actionable way, meaning not just here are all the skills that I have, but how can I use these skills or how have I used these skills to benefit the business? Or to complete a project or whatever it might be. It's not just going to be here are my credentials, here's the degree or the certifications that I've earned. It's about making it valuable for the organization that you're trying to get into or that you're already a part of.
Great points. And I do want to call out one other thing, because there is a challenge, right? Like it's wonderful that an employee wants to upskill. It's wonderful when the employer wants to support the employee, but employees also there's a lot on their plate, right? They're trying to do their current job. They're trying to also upskill and be prepared for the future. How do you suggest that they balance all those things, without without burning out? Seth, I think you have some thoughts around this.
Yeah, there's always going to be work to get done,
Yeah.
right? And I think that it ties back to the business priorities, right? I think one thing that we've seen a lot in our research is this blending of the technology side and the business side. I think those two things used to be a little bit more separated, and the business side would say, here's what we want to achieve. Now, technology side, you go and build us out the systems that we need in order to do that. But now technology is driving the business, right? And so there's always going to be these daily priorities, these near term things that have to get done, but there's also going to be a long term vision, right? And so I think that you have to position your skill building and the work that you're doing in both of those frameworks, and you have to say, okay, I'm getting this work done and it's allowing the business to advance or meet its goals. And I also would like to grow in this area, which will help the business get to where it needs to be as well.
I want to just call out a comment in the chat here from Astrid. These are challenges for both parties. Just as companies want to implement new tools and technologies, we employees also want to adapt and learn. So thank you for that, Astrid. Anyone else want to chime in and share their thoughts on that question?
Oh, go ahead, Sadie.
No, go ahead, George.
Well, and I guess I take it from the company side. I think that especially for our organization, what we really look for is support from leadership and making sure that leadership is behind. If you're interested in doing stuff, make sure you've had some communication with your manager, with your leadership team, and so that you're not kind of doing it just in a vacuum. And we've certainly talked a lot about some of the other things that within an organization, mentorship and, kind of traditional reverse peer-to-peer mentorship opportunities. But that would just be my only comment, that it's kind of got to be a two-way street or it doesn't really work.
Yeah, get buy-in, right, from your manager, and then they're going to help support you, make sure you have the time and the space to keep learning.
And my biggest recommendation to people is just to audit your time. So often we don't actually know where our time is going and how much time we're spending it on. And one of the practices that I do is I've been keeping data on myself for the past 10 years of what I've done in half an hour increments. So I know where my time goes and I can calculate it and measure it and see then if it aligns with my priorities. So typically in job descriptions, you have percentages for what portion of your job should be spent on what part of the tasks that you need to be doing. And oftentimes there is a learning and development. And so if you audit your time, you can actually calculate and compare to that and potentially have a conversation with your manager. Hey, my job description says this, but my time is a little off. Can you help me get back on track? Or could we adjust some of these? And so I just highly recommend audit yourself, audit your time, and then use data as a conversation starter, but also as a way to make those small adjustments.
Yeah, I feel like people auditing their time, they will be perhaps surprised at, how maybe like how many wasteful meetings or, there's just so much that we do in a day that we're not capturing that when you do this exercise, your mind will be blown. I'm pretty confident. So
My
thank you
mind
for,
is still blown every
yeah,
day. After 10 years, I'm still blown away. So
yeah,
I
10 years
agree.
of data tracking. That's very impressive,
You
Sadie.
know, Sadie, that it actually scares me. I do keep my 30 minutes, but I've never really added them up into buckets. I probably wish I got paid by the Teams call. How about that?
Well,
We'd
you
all
got
be
a good
rich.
task to do this after this meeting, though.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for that. And we do have another question from Shankar in the chat. Shankar asks, hybrid/remote work is here to stay. How can tech leaders ensure distributed teams remain aligned and innovative amid rapid technological changes?
I
So I can
think,
start off.
go ahead, Sadie. Yeah.
Yeah, so something that I implemented on my team because it is hybrid that's helped a lot is really daily status updates that are digital. And the reason for this is what we found with hybrid teams was that communication gets bifurcated. So with people who come in person, they're able to chat in person and they have those conversations. People online or remote, yes, they have a digital footprint and trail, but then the two never merge and meet. And so we have to have some way for those to coincide. And so just a simple reminder for people, we have a channel where we have a daily status update. And so everybody has to add their status update in that channel just to keep people in sync with what's going on and having one set place for it to be, because it can be difficult to keep teams in line and in sync, particularly as some are remote and some are in person. And really, it's the communication channels of where things break down.
And that ties into what I was going to say. There's a time honored tradition, when we were all in person of if you were a leader, you did a lot of management by walking around, going in, checking in with your people. And that was more of an informal thing. So like, the stuff that you're describing, Sadie, I think the frequency is the thing to focus on. And that can be either in a formal way through, status updates or tools that people are using, but I think it also needs to be that informal piece as well, just checking in on people, how you doing, whatever, which I think becomes very difficult to do when you're remote. And some people, you click with a little bit more, some people a little bit less. And I think it has to become a priority to be checking in with everyone beyond just the status updates. What did you get done? How did you help the business this week type of thing?
Yeah, I totally agree. And a few comments I'd have. So first of all, technology is great these days. We do recaps on LinkedIn or recapped out of Teams all the time now, and that can keep to the question of how do you stay aligned? How do you keep things moving? We do Teams recaps after all kinds of meetings, and so you know what actions. So if you haven't checked that out, that's a really cool functionality. Certainly don't want to turn this into a discussion on in-person versus hybrid versus remote, but I would give a shout out if you're new to a company, that getting in person or getting hybrid a little more often, there's definitely a benefit. Those things that it's really hard to pick up the culture of a company, virtually or digitally. And so to the degree, and then you get those once in a while interactions, whether it's senior leadership or somebody that's been there for 10 years or whatnot, and you maybe don't get those if you're not in person. So the only thing I would say is how do you kind of lean into that? Maybe if there's an opportunity and you're able to get in a little more to the office, that could actually benefit you, especially if you're new to the company.
I love that. I will also call out and say the younger generation. I think going into the office, there's a lot you just get through osmosis, listening, hearing those conversations. And so, and those like interactions, building the relationships, networking, as we talked about earlier. So all excellent tips from you all. Thank you so much. And we only have, believe it or not, a few minutes before we have to end. So I want to switch gears now and do some rapid fire questions to close us out. Just squeeze any additional knowledge we can from each of you. And so I'm going to ask each of you a question. You will have 30 seconds to respond. So short and sweet. And let's get started. So, Seth, my question for you is, what is the biggest tech trend to watch in 2025?
I would say for me, it's going to be integration. Going all the way back to the beginning of our discussion, George, you mentioned complexity as being one of the biggest challenges that companies are facing. I think it's even an underrated challenge, even as much as they realize there is. I think there's a ton more that has built up over the years. And now pulling all those pieces together to integrate them and eventually automate them, I think is going to be a thing that companies are really turning toward.
Like, George, what is one actionable strategy for closing the tech skills gap?
Oh, that's a really good one. Maybe I'd look at it kind of through two lenses. If you're looking for a tech job, be a technologist, be a tech geek. Even if that's not necessarily your home base, just trying to learn something new. I mentioned the Google I/O conference with the top 100 things. Jump on, check it out. There's amazing new tools, new technology that's coming out every single day. If you're looking for people and you're hiring, and we touched on this a bunch, be open to different backgrounds. It may not, Seth, you hit it. It may not be I started in tech support and I went to this and I moved up to infrastructure. Now I'm in, software and apps. You might have to be open to people with different backgrounds if you're going to kind of close the skills gap in your organization.
Yeah, excellent. Our careers are a jungle gym. And to Sadie, what is your top tip for tech professionals looking to upskill?
Yeah, I would say pick a lane and stay focused. There's so much noise out there. Focusing will be your superpower. So if you can pick an area, really dive into it and become an expert, you're going to have a lot of success. So pick a lane and stay focused.
Great. I love that. There's so much we can learn, right? So staying focused, I think that's great advice. And let's do one more round because we still have a few more minutes. So I want to make sure I get all your knowledge for our audience today. So Seth, back to you. What is one common mistake companies make when managing tech debt during transformation?
Um, I would say a common mistake is assuming that all the tech debt that you have is the tech debt that you see. I think that there needs to be more of an audit and say like, if we were to build things from scratch, what would we build like, and how far are we from that? It's not just okay. We're having this problem with this one migration. I think there really needs to be a comprehensive view of it to get the best solution on the back end.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's a theme I'm seeing through all your responses about being very specific, being intentional. And there's just so many moving pieces. So, to your point, we have to make sure we are seeing the whole picture. George, for you, what is your top recommendation for aligning tech talent strategy with digital transformation goals?
Yeah, these are easy. Come on. No, someone. Uh, I would say, be open to change, and I mean, change is all around us, and that's whether you're with a company or you're looking to join a company. Just be very open to change, and I referenced it earlier that and this is from time to time, what you find is sometimes people aren't willing to change. And when folks aren't willing to change, sometimes we need to change those people, meaning literally hire somebody else to do that role because you just don't have that aptitude that we talked about on your current staff.
Yeah, 100%. And for anyone in the audience who's nervous about change, remember that change opens up the door to a lot of opportunities. It's really a chance for you to step up and show your stuff. So, totally agree with that, George. And then Sadie, closing us out, what is one trait or skill you think will define tech talent in the next 3 to 5 years?
That's going to be the ability to collaborate with AI. And using AI is really a superpower, particularly when it comes to technology with tools like Cursor and Replit and Copilot. I mean, AI shines so bright right now, particularly with coding and all the technical skills. But any skill can adapt and use AI at their current workflow. And so I think those who are really going to take it to the next level are going to be the ones who are collaborators with AI and not going against it. And so take that time to really see how do I adapt it into my workflow and how do I use that as that superpower and super pack on top of what I'm already doing.
I appreciate you also calling out some tools. If anyone in the audience wants to share their favorite tools, please feel free so we can all keep learning from each other. And I want to thank you all, George, Sadie, and Seth. Thank you for being here, for sharing your extremely valuable insights today. I love moderating these sessions because I learned so much from experts like you. And as I like to say, with every challenge comes opportunity. And I think you've all really shown us today that there are, in fact, many incredible opportunities for those who are prepared to adapt, innovate, lean into AI. So thank you to the audience for joining us for this Robert Half Real Talk session. We hope you found the discussion informative and inspiring. And remember that staying ahead in tech requires continuous learning, strategic planning, and of course, you have to have a willingness to embrace all this change that's coming our way. If you are looking for solutions to overcome tech recruiting challenges, be sure to download Robert Half's Building Future Forward Tech Teams reports at roberthalf.com, and we will see you next time.